Hello. So what are we going to do today is continue our lesson on energy. But today we're going to do photosynthesis. Photosynthesis. So I need you to pause this video and I need you to write down this chemical equation for photosynthesis. Yes, go ahead and pause it now. The chemical equation is 6CO2, which is 6 carbon dioxides Then we have 6H2O, which is 6 water molecules. C6H12O6 is 1 glucose molecule. And 6O2 is 6 oxygen. Okay, so photosynthesis obviously takes place in the chloroplast of plants. I remember the episode of SpongeBob, he was like, photosynthesis. So, photosynthesis. Well, what is photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis is the process that plants use to trap the sun's energy and builds up carbohydrates. What was the carbohydrate that it builds up? Well, glucose, right? So here again is the formula. C6O2 plus C6H2O with the light causes 1 molecule of glucose, which is C6H12O6 plus 6O2. Now, we have light, right? But visible light is made up of wavelengths in several colors, right? Do y'all remember how to say it? Roy, G, Biv. If you don't know what that is, that's red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. That's the colors of the rainbow. So that's the visible light. Plants use chloroplast to capture photosynthesis, but we also use the chlorophyll to help capture the sunlight. There are 2 main types of chlorophyll. So we have chlorophyll A and we have chlorophyll B. Now, it absorbs mostly red and blue wavelengths, like whatever's between red and blue, right? What colors can be between red and blue? We have red, orange, yellow, green, and we got a little bit of bluish, right? So when you have fall, we have red, orange, yellow plants. When we have spring, we have green leaves. Some leaves actually can turn into almost like a purplish blue. Um, and so that's why that's what's being absorbed, okay? So the red and blue is being absorbed, but we actually see what's being reflected. So plants appear green because green light is reflected, not absorbed. So when it said it absorbs red and blue, we usually see between red and blue. But red, sometimes we see red leaves, but it's more like a reddish orange sometimes, and we don't really see the blue leaves. We see almost like a color, like a teal color sometimes going into it. Because what the color you see is the color that's being reflected, not absorbed. So again, this is my 3rd time mentioning it, so it obviously must be important. Photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast. So remember, chloroplast is the energy source for plants, right? Most chloroplasts are in the leaves of the cell. Cell leaves. Yes, they look like these little green things right here. Has a whole stack of thylakoids in them. Um, So there's two main parts of chloroplast that is needed for photosynthesis. So we're going to break down these chloroplasts. So here is the chloroplast. One of the first things is the grana. Grana is what I call like stacked pancakes. Um, those are called basically the thylakoids. So the whole stack is called granium, but the thylakoid is one of them. Okay. Membrane and thylakoids contain chlorophyll. Well, chlorophyll is what makes it green. So obviously we see that it is green. Okay. Now there is a membrane that surrounds it and it's fluid to kind of keep it. And you see all this right here? All that little liquidy stuff, that is called stroma. But however, photosynthesis happens in two phases. We either have light dependent and light independent. So because it occurs in these two stages, let's first talk about light dependent. So this is where we capture energy from sunlight. Obviously, it's dependent on the sun, right? This occurs across the membranes of thylakoids. What has to be needed here? Water and sunlight. So we need the light to hit the plant, and when the rain comes, the rain is absorbed inside the soil, and then the roots uptake the water that is in the soil. Light dependent, okay, chlorophyll absorbs energy from sunlight. This is called the photosystem. So it absorbs energy from the sunlight. So once we do it, energy is transferred along the thylakoid membrane. So this is where water molecules are broken down. Okay, so the water molecules breaking down and oxygen is produced. Okay, so let's show you from here. We have the sunlight and we have water. Okay, here's the thylakoid, which is again where our energy takes place because the thylakoid is inside. It captures the light from the chlorophyll. Well, once the sunlight and water come together, it gives you the 6O2. So that's 6 oxygen here breaks down into the 6 water molecules break down into 6 oxygen molecules. So then, as you see, I already talked about in the last one with the water molecules break down into oxygen. Now, light independent uses energy from the light dependent reaction. So this one isn't coming just from the sun itself. This one's coming from the light dependent reaction. So this occurs in the stroma. Remember, light dependent occurs across the thylakoid membrane. This one occurs in the stroma of the chloroplast. So here, CO2 is needed. So CO2 is added to the cycle to build larger molecules, and we call that the Calvin cycle. Okay. Energy from the light-dependent reaction is used. This is how we make that sugar glucose. So here it is. So once we get here, remember plants take in carbon dioxide, right? So this is us breathing out the carbon dioxide. So the chloroplast captures it, and this makes the sugar. So the carbon dioxide goes through this, and you see it's a cycle. So inside the stroma, it's going through a cycle, and again, that cycle, we call it the Calvin cycle, then builds the leftover molecules. Remember, we already had the 6 oxygen, and remember glucose is C6H12O6, right? So we get the carbon and the oxygen from carbon dioxide. And remember, from the water molecules, we had some stuff left over. Because remember, we was ending up with just oxygen, but we started off with water. Those hydrogen go right here and build that sugar. So the equation for the whole process, this is why we have the carbon dioxide and we have water and we have light. And that's how we built the glucose, and then that's how we built the oxygen. So again, the light dependent, this gives us water, and light gives us the oxygen, right? Carbon dioxide inside of the stroma and the cycle that takes from the energy from the ATP being released from the dependent gives us the sugar, which was the C6H12O6. So this is just a picture to show you again the light dependent versus the light independent. So we have the light in water, hits the chloroplast, the thylakoids, and brings forth water, but it releases its energy to this cycle known as the Calvin cycle because the carbon dioxide comes in, takes that energy, mix it up in a stroma, and makes your sugars. Now, again, pause this. This is what you need to know. Write this in your notes because you have to know this. The main factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis. So affect the rate of photosynthesis is light intensity. That's number one. Carbon dioxide. Number two. And temperature. Now let's be honest. If it's always dark, will you have the high rate of photosynthesis? Okay. If you don't have a lot of carbon dioxide, will your plants live? Okay. If it's so cold, do we really get plants in the winter? All right, so we have to know some functions of photosynthesis. Basically, what is the whole purpose, though? It's that plants produce food for themselves and other organisms. So plants, once they do it, things that eat the plant gets energy, right? Animals use oxygen produced in photosynthesis, and cellular respiration releases stored energy, right? So, of course, this is where we get this cycle. We breathe out the carbon dioxide, it goes to the plants, right? The plants say, in return, I give you oxygen. So we use the oxygen that was produced from photosynthesis, and the plants use carbon dioxide that was produced from cellular respiration, which was our released energy. It also provides materials for plant growth and development. So simple sugars make your starches and cellulose, right? So remember, starch is plants. Pretty much a lot of carbohydrates deal with plants, and the cellulose, right? Especially your green leafy items. We need those for like people, the cows have to eat it. They break it down. Um, but photosynthesis allows that to happen. So those sugars actually come together to build it, right? Because remember, starch is a polysaccharide, which was 3 or more sugars, right? So photosynthesis allows that starch to be developed. Now, the last thing that photosynthesis helps is that it regulates carbon dioxide. For the Earth's environment. Like if we didn't have plants, then carbon dioxide would never be regulated, and then we all could die off because we will be breathing in all of this, and instead of our body trying to release it, we're going to be starting to take it in because there's nothing to capture it. So now you have to identify these graphs by the effect of light intensity on rate of photosynthesis. So which of the graphs represent the effect of light intensity on photosynthesis? So if you had a lot of light, how would that affect photosynthesis? Okay, right. I mean, if you just have too much light, is it going to go anywhere? No, what happens is when they first start getting that, it grows. And then when we get to a standoff point, right? Plants and stuff, they're not just going to go like this and keep on going and going. When a plant hits, like for you, once you hit a certain age, you pretty much hit your growth spurt, right? But during that time, you're growing. So as long as you're getting your nutrients, you're growing. You may grow, but you're going to grow at a slower pace. So that's basically what that says. Now, which one affects the temperature on the rate of photosynthesis? So how does temperature have an effect? Now, light, we know it's going to make you grow immediately. It's going to kind of even off because they can't grow but so fast. Like, you're not going to see a pine tree in your front yard get taller by next week. Takes time. So what about temperature? Temperature, right? Is this one. Why? If the temperature is good, the plant's going to do what? Go up. And if it's at a steady. But what happens in the wintertime? Photosynthesis declines, and so the plants decline.